Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
Hi, Calvin. I was born on January 28, 1890, in Seattle, Washington. My given name at birth was Robert Franklin Stroud, long before the public and the papers ever turned me into a character for their stories.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
I grew up primarily in Seattle with my parents, Benjamin Franklin Stroud and Elizabeth Jane McCartney, along with my younger brother and two older half-sisters from my mother's first marriage. Home life was incredibly miserable and abusive. My father was a violent alcoholic who routinely turned his drunken rage and threats of violence against my mother and us kids. I frequently felt like I had to act as a shield to protect my sisters and my brother from his outbursts. It was a cold, unstable environment that drove me straight to the streets at a very young age.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
During my early decades behind bars, I was just known by my inmate numbers, like number 17,431 at Leavenworth. But later on, the media branded me with a nickname that followed me into history, the Birdman of Alcatraz. It is a bit ironic because all of my actual work and breeding labs with birds took place while I was still locked up at Leavenworth. By the time they transferred me to Alcatraz, they barred me from keeping any cages, so I was really the Birdman of Leavenworth. But the Alcatraz moniker is the one that stuck.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
I was a deeply isolated, sickly child, and my mother's intense overprotectiveness made it incredibly difficult for me to socialize with other kids. School was absolute misery for me because of that. I only attended formal schooling up until the 3rd grade, walking away from the classroom completely at the age of 12. I had a minimal formal education, though I later proved I had a high capacity for learning once I had nothing but time on my hands.
Was there a specific moment when you realized you were fundamentally different from everyone else?
A clear realization of my psychological makeup came from the official evaluations done by prison psychiatrists later in my life. They diagnosed me with a history of manic depression and periodic schizophrenic episodes, noting that I possessed an above-average intelligence, but also an infantile personality driven by a severe obsession with revenge against anyone I felt had crossed or ratted on me. I realized that my mental wiring made me operate with a volatile hostility that regular society just couldn't tolerate.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
When I was 13, I made the choice to run away from my father's abuse and become what I called a great American bum, drifting aimlessly for years. In 1908, when I was 18, I decided to head up to the Alaska Territory to find work on a railroad construction gang in a boomtown called Cordova. At the time, it just felt like a young drifter looking for an honest dollar. But moving to that rugged, lawless frontier is what directly introduced me to the lifestyle and the conflicts that triggered my entry into the penal system.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement, and what were the consequences?
My very first official arrest happened in Juneau, Alaska in January of 1909. I had become involved with an older dance hall entertainer named Kitty O'Brien. A mutual acquaintance of ours, a bartender named Charles Damer, viciously beat and robbed Kitty while I was away. When I found out, I took her revolver, confronted Damer at his cottage, and shot him dead. I immediately turned myself into the local city marshal. I eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and the judge handed me a 12-year sentence at the McNeil Island Federal Penitentiary in Washington State.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It was in the 1950s when my life story was transformed into a major publishing and Hollywood phenomenon. While I was isolated in the D block of Alcatraz, a biographical project about my decades in solitary and my avian studies was completed, and Hollywood turned it into a massive feature film starring Burt Lancaster. Realizing that the entire world was watching a silver screen depiction of my prison life made it clear that prisoner number 594 would never be erased from public memory.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
The public notoriety didn't change my nature, but it shed light on a deeply complex duality. Before the fame, I was incredibly violent behind bars. I stabbed a hospital worker at McNeil Island who reported me for intimidating inmates, and I stabbed another prisoner who accused me of stealing food. The public narrative later painted me as a completely transformed, gentle scientist, but the authorities always maintained that the violent, unyielding predator was still very much alive under that academic mask.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
My own violent, vengeful instincts and a total lack of restraint are what truly betrayed me. On March 26, 1916, at Leavenworth, a new prison guard named Andrew F. Turner put me on report for a minor infraction, which stripped away my upcoming visiting privileges with my younger brother, whom I hadn't seen in 8 years. Enraged by this, I walked into the crowded dining hall in front of more than 1,000 inmates and stabbed guard Turner to death. That single act of ultimate retaliation completely destroyed any chance I ever had at a normal life.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
People are always stunned to learn that while in solitary confinement at Leavenworth, I became a globally recognized self-taught ornithologist. It started in 1920 when I found a fallen sparrow nest with 3 live hatchlings after a storm in the yard. I raised them, and that blossomed into an obsession where the administration eventually let me keep up to 300 canaries across several cells. I conducted formal scientific research, discovered cures for avian hemorrhages, and authored 2 definitive textbooks, Diseases of Canaries and Stroud's Digest on the Diseases of Birds.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public never understood the bizarre pressure of running a highly successful commercial business right from a solitary confinement cell. I wasn't just studying birds, I was manufacturing and marketing my own bird medicines, selling the canaries to prison visitors, and answering thousands of pieces of correspondence from bird enthusiasts worldwide. Managing a global entrepreneurial enterprise while under the constant, suffocating surveillance of hostile prison guards who hated my privileges was an immense mental strain.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My defining lifelong rivalry was against the federal prison wardens and the bureaucratic system itself, particularly the administration at Leavenworth. The warden there was absolutely infuriated by the respect and leniency I received from the outside scientific community. They viewed me strictly as a cold-blooded guard killer who deserved the gallows, and they fought a continuous battle to systematically strip away my bird privileges, my materials, and my business operations.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
While the outside world viewed me as a thriving scientist, I was privately fighting severe physical illnesses. Early during my stay at Leavenworth, prison doctors diagnosed me with a chronic kidney disease. I had to manage the pain of sluggish kidneys and constant constipation through strict diets and experimental medicines, all while navigating the extreme mental deterioration that comes with spending over 40 years of your life completely isolated in solitary cells.
What was your darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
The absolute darkest period was in 1942, when the Bureau abruptly transferred me away from Leavenworth to the maximum security isolation of Alcatraz Island. They forced me to leave all of my birds, my cages, and my laboratory equipment behind. Being stripped of the one thing that gave my existence a sense of utility and being thrown into a cold, birdless cell on the rock was an utter abyss of anger and desolation.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
The hardest truth to escape was that no matter how many scientific breakthroughs I achieved or how many books I published, I could never wash the blood of Guard Turner off my hands. Alone at night, I had to face the reality that my own explosive temper had permanently sealed me inside a concrete cage, ensuring I would never touch the outside world again.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
After I killed Guard Turner in 1916, I was tried and convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by hanging. I went through 3 separate trials due to legal technicalities, but the death sentence stuck every time. I was waiting on death row when my mother and I petitioned Mrs. Woodrow Wilson for executive clemency. Just 1 week before my scheduled execution in 1920, President Wilson commuted my sentence to life imprisonment without the absolute possibility of parole, mandating that I spend that life in solitary confinement.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you, and what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The absolute wildest exaggeration was the entire premise of the Hollywood movie. Millions of people watched The Birdman of Alcatraz and pictured me sitting on that island surrounded by chirping, nesting colonies of birds. The reality is a total myth created by Hollywood to sell theater tickets. I never had a single bird during the entire 17 years I spent on Alcatraz. I was just inmate number 594, living in strict isolation.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
The biggest misconception is that I was a reformed, gentle, and harmless old man of science who was being cruelly persecuted by the government. While I was dedicated to my ornithology, my behavior behind bars remained deeply problematic, sullen, and antagonistic. The prison officials kept me in solitary because they knew that whenever I was around other inmates, my volatile personality tended to inspire frequent friction and violence.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
It would surprise people to know how much I managed to accomplish intellectually despite only having a third-grade education. Aside from my ornithology books, I took numerous long-distance correspondence courses from the Kansas State Agricultural College, excelling in advanced mathematics, physics, and music. And I even taught myself to read and write multiple foreign languages inside my cell.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on November 21st, 1963, at the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri, where I had been transferred as my health collapsed. I was 73 years old, and I passed away from natural causes after spending 54 consecutive years of my life behind prison bars.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
My downfall was entirely the result of my own profound flaws and my complete inability to acclimate to the rules of institutional life. The world didn't trap me. It was my own choice to use a blade to settle a grievance in the Leavenworth dining hall that triggered the lifetime of solitary confinement that defined my existence.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
I carried a deep bitterness toward the prison administration until the very end, always blaming the authorities for my isolation. But if I could erase that split-second decision to stab Guard Turner over a revoked visitor pass, I would, because it cost me my freedom forever. Yet, in a strange way, that isolation is the exact crucible that forced me to focus my mind and build the entire legacy of the Birdman.
What scared you more? Getting caught? Losing power? Or being forgotten?
Losing my autonomy and having my intellectual work suppressed terrified me the most. When the prison bureau confiscated my manuscripts, stopped me from selling my medicines, and banned my birds, it felt like they were completely extinguishing my mind. I fought aggressively against that loss of power, because without my work, I was just a ghost in a concrete box.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
The legal system and the guards rightfully recorded me as a cold-blooded killer and a dangerous institutional villain. The public and bird lovers saw me as an eccentric, heroic symbol of rehabilitation through education. I suppose I am a complex mix of both, a violently flawed man who managed to contribute something genuinely lasting to science from the deepest depths of a solitary cell.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
I just want people to look past the Hollywood romance and understand that time is the most valuable thing a man has. Don't waste your life and your intellect fighting walls when you can use your mind to build something real. Thank you for letting me lay out the facts, Calvin.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.